Why would anyone ever sell a tenanted property? Well, as the owner of the UK's leading agency that sells tenanted property, I'm going to explain that to you today and why tenanted property trading is the new wave of investment property sales. Let's do it. Hey, it's Gary from Let Property, and we help thousands of landlords every single year buy and sell investment properties through the sale of specialist tenanted properties. I personally own a multiple seven-figure property portfolio, and I'm here today to help investors just like you get invested in property in a hands-off way. I've spoken about this a lot in the past. When you sell a property with a sitting tenant, you're only targeting about 10% of the entire property buying marketplace because you cannot hit the main market of residential property, which is to residential buyers who want to live in the property. So with a constrained buyer base of only 10% of the market, why would a landlord ever sell a property tenanted? Why would they want to take a hit on the property and sell it with its sitting tenant in place? And I've even in the past spoken about the opportunity that buyers actually have to buy in as one of these 10% players and come in and focus actually in buying tenanted properties. It's one of the main things that I have actually done over the last couple of years. Well, there's actually a ton of reasons that an investor would sell a property with a sitting tenant, and we're going to cover that in this video. So the first thing that you need to understand is that every investor that buys or sells has completely different goals from you. And many people assume that their own goals are the same as other people's, and that is just completely not the case. Many of the sellers we work with are actually portfolio landlords that have owned properties for 15 or 20 years. There's people that we know that have bought properties for £30,000 and are literally selling them for over £100,000 today after about 10 years. If we take an average rent of 20 years at £500 per month, that would be £120,000 in rent that landlord has probably achieved on that property as well. Now the thing is, when that landlord goes to sell off that portfolio, is he caring whether he gets an extra £10,000 out of that sale? He's cash flowed in that property for a very long time. He's a very happy tenant in place. A lot of these landlords are not looking to maximize in the way that you are, and that's actually where opportunity can sometimes come in. The reality is, it's not a strict basis that properties that are tenanted sell for less than market value. There definitely are a lot more opportunities within that realm than other places, because many of the landlords that sell properties tenanted don't perhaps care as much about achieving that maximum price as perhaps a residential buyer that only owns one property will. That's why there is a presentation of potential opportunity within that space. The other factor that you really need to consider when you're selling a property with a tenant, and that a landlord will consider, will actually be the cash flow that the property produces. And this is a huge factor when it comes to selling. That's one of the main reasons that I think selling properties with sitting tenants is actually the new wave of investing in property. Because if you sell a property tenanted versus evicting the tenant and selling it vacant, the buyer and the seller are actually going to receive cash flow right through that entire sales process. The seller will receive cash flow on the property right up until the point of sale, and they will not be responsible for any of the costs on that property. The buyer who purchases the property will receive instant cash flow from day one and will not be required to put in a hefty refurb job to the property. So everyone's a real winner when something is actually sold tenanted. And if you think about the losses that a seller would actually have in a case where they're selling a property, it can be quite considerable. Let's take a standard property at £100,000 that produces a £700 per month rent. That landlord is now losing £700 per month from the moment he evicts that tenant. And that landlord is now responsible for the council tax, the gas and electricity on that property, adding another couple £100 onto the bill. That means for every month that property does not sell, that landlord is losing £1,000 per month. If you look at a sale time frame from start to finish of 5 months, perhaps, maybe we sold it quickly and we sold it in a month. Sometimes you even go through the sales process and it can fall through. We're back in the market, we're back through again. It can sometimes take as much as 5 months to sell. That's £5,000 that landlord has actually lost out of pocket trying to sell that property. And that's not even to account for the potential eviction process that landlord might have had to have gone through to even get to that point of being able to sell at the first place in a vacant manner. So when you add in all the legislation and you add in everything to the mix, you're actually in a situation where very often it makes a lot more sense just to move the property onto someone else. And many landlords that we even work with that are buying the property will see it as a real advantage to have it tenanted because, again, it's cash flow from day one. They're not buying something vacant and have to get that property fully compliant, having to put that tenant in place, not having any void periods. They're getting that extra £1,000 per month coming in on the day of purchase as well. The final thing you need to consider is that many landlords have an emotional tie to the property or even to the tenant that's living in the property. And as I've mentioned, some of them are selling off multiple properties in one go. They're portfolio sellers. They're not wanting to go through the guilt-ridden process very often of evicting the tenant. They don't want to go through that process. They just want to move the property on directly to another investor because it's the most simple approach to take, and it's also easier for them and easier for the tenant because the tenant gets to continue living in that property. And timescale is also a huge factor within an eviction because an eviction can take months and drag on. Sometimes people are needing to achieve the money for the property that they're selling within months, and they don't have the time to wait to actually go through the eviction process. So if you're a buyer, this is why tenanted property purchasing actually represents one of the best opportunities in the marketplace to actually get an edge and come in and purchase properties that cash flow from day one. Because as I mentioned, you're not going to have all of those upfront costs, you're not going to have all those outlays, and you're going to be able to achieve that income from the first day of purchase. What I really see tenanted property sales is I see it as a comparison to the stock market for houses, because effectively what you're doing is you're keeping properties in the class of investments and you're trading them between investors in the same way that companies trade between investors. And in the UK, the way we've done things for many years, which doesn't make very much sense to me, is that we seem to go through this constant process of investors effectively evicting tenants, making the property vacant, selling it on the market for more investors to come in on the market and buy vacant properties and just re-tenant them. I mean, how inefficient would it be to have a property tenanted, evict the tenant, sell it vacant for another investor to buy it and then re-tenant it? That makes no sense at all. And that is the way for many, many years that property investment sales has been. And tenanted property sales is just a much more efficient process for all those parties to come in and actually create a transactional marketplace for people to actually buy and sell tenanted properties together. And that's why let property has become one of the single first points of contact for many investors who are actually looking to buy tenanted properties. That's because we transact so many of them and we focus on this area of investing, competing with what I think is the stock market. So if you'd like to learn more about the good and the bad side of tenanted property investing, I actually shot a video exactly on this topic and I weighed everything up so you can understand it better. Just click the link over here to check that out.